I believe that strict immigration policies are a good thing that were implemented throughout U.S. history because they protect the rights and have protected the rights and interests of our citizens.
I disagree with you because although they did protect the rights and interests of our citizens, they ignored and disregarded the rights of the citizens that the immigration policies targeted.
Throughout history, various immigration policies have been implemented in the United States to protect the interests of its citizens. Let's start with the Page Act of 1875, which aimed to regulate the immigration of Asian laborers, especially Chinese women, who were often trafficked into forced labor or prostitution. Implementing this act was necessary in safeguarding vulnerable individuals. The Page Act of 1875 basically stopped people from coming to the United States for immoral reasons. It basically tried to stop human trafficking.
While the intentions behind the Page Act may have been noble, it was still a discriminatory policy targeting specific ethnic groups. The act basically was hidden as an act trying to stop human trafficking, but it was used to segregate Chinese women. It effectively banned the immigration of Chinese women by portraying most of them as arriving in the U.S. solely to work as prostitutes. This generalization of Chinese women, all as prostitutes, adds to processes to maintain white superiority and oppress foreign people.
The Immigration Act of 1882 was a response to concerns over increasing immigration and sought to control the flow of immigrants into the United States. It was implemented to protect the country's economic and social stability by ensuring the admission of individuals who could contribute positively to the society. Sure, we can say that these acts may have been a little bit discriminatory, but we cannot lose sight of our prioritized people, our own in this country. As James Monroe suggested in the Monroe Doctrine, we are to stay out of European affairs as much as possible. It is not our responsibility to protect the rights of other countries' citizens, especially during 1882, when we were struggling to protect the rights of our own. Although the Immigration Act of 1882 was a discriminatory policy, we must remember that it was a product of its time. We were not to enact it. Who knows what could have happened as a result? Our society would have been completely shifted. Economy could have risen or gone down, but consequently, Americans could have been robbed of jobs.
Did you know the Immigration Act of 1882 is also called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882? It stands as a glaring example of discriminatory policies our right-ran government saw okay at the time. It explicitly targeted Chinese immigrants, suspending their immigration and denying them naturalization rights. This act was passed to maintain racial purity, not only discriminating against a certain race, but contributed to gross ideas of white superiority. Maybe preventing immigration as a whole is more justifiable, but targeting a specific country and people to help maintain a certain race's dominion is not something we as a country should stand for.
The Immigration Act of 1917. The Immigration Act of 1917 implemented literacy tests as a requirement for naturalization in the United States. Though this might seem as a test to neglect immigrants from entering the United States, the literacy tests were actually very friendly and could be taken in any language, just as long as you passed. Again, though these literacy tests might seem as a way to neglect immigrants from coming to the United States, the tests were used to make sure immigrants could communicate in ways other than speech, which would allow for integration to be much easier for such immigrants. Though many immigrants at first would want to not assimilate in the U.S. and preserve their culture, generations later would find themselves integrated with everyone else because of literacy, according to the government.
These literacy tests were unfair and forget to consider the background of those taking them. These tests made it impossible for anyone who was not given the same educational opportunities as another to embrace and take on America. Our Constitution mentions that natural rights are unalienable, supposedly. But an act like this takes away opportunity from those looking to better themselves. 1917 was a time where America was the prime place to start a new life and flee from oppression people may have faced. To this day, all around the world, there are still corrupt, unjust governments which strip humans of their natural liberty. It is not our responsibility, but our privilege as a country to preserve and protect these rights. Enacting an act that allows one to exercise their rights based upon the education they received or the culture they were immersed in is not fair and an insult to humanity as a whole.
What about the alien contract labor laws, passed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which restricted the immigration of contract laborers, primarily from Asia and Europe? The alien contract labor laws were enacted to protect American workers from unfair competition and exploitation. By controlling the influx of contract labor, the United States aimed to ensure fair wages and working conditions for its citizens. The labor laws basically forbade businesses from bringing over immigrants to the United States to work for cheap. Not only would have American citizens lost potential job opportunities, but the immigrants being brought over would have been exploited. If the alien contract labor law additionally would have never been passed, then workers' unalienable job rights would have been exploited daily.
At what point are selfish, tunnel vision thoughts okay if they ignore the unalienable rights of all citizens our Constitution supposedly guarantees? It is foolish to defend the hypocrisy we committed in establishing the alien contract labor laws. While the alien contract labor laws may have aimed to protect American workers, they also contribute to xenophobia and discrimination against certain immigrant groups. As a country, we cannot go against the fundamental principles in our Constitution which define us as a country. Going against these ideas, which were created to ensure liberty for all, contradicts that and promotes a selfish world in which our unfair decisions lead to the decreased quality of life for another. Following the Emancipation Proclamation, you would think our country was heading in the right direction of not discriminating upon others. The hatred of others was placed on immigrants, and American dominion continued to prevail and prevent others from attaining experiences all should have the right to. Another significant policy to consider is the Immigration Act of 1882, which imposed a head tax on immigrants and barred certain groups from entry.
Let's shift our focus to the Immigration Law of 1924, also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, which introduced immigration quotas based on nationality. It's important to acknowledge the context within which these policies were implemented. At the time, Americans were scared of too many people from these certain countries immigrating to the United States and completely shifting the aspects that they used to define American culture. Regulating each country's immigration was not discriminatory because it did not target specific people. Rather, assured immigration was equal for everyone.
The Immigration Law of 1924 reflected a desire to preserve the ethnic and cultural makeup of the United States, favoring immigrants from Western and Northern Europe over those from other regions. This policy perpetuated racial and national biases and limited opportunities for immigrants from other parts of the world. Making immigration quotas from each country equal disregarded the fact that country populations were equal and chance for opportunity in America shouldn't discriminate against certain races. Nick, I agree with many points you made regarding protecting the rights of Americans, but we cannot forget the fact that many of these took away from those the acts were implemented upon. Your arguments for stricter regulations emphasize national security and economic considerations and ultimately the American experience altogether.
John, I can see where you are coming from, and I agree. It is important that while maintaining our American opportunities, we must not lose sight of the fact that everyone we are enacting these policies upon are just as human as we are. I like how your arguments highlight the humanity everyone still retains despite their nationality of race. Looking back on immigration, we can see today the cultural enrichment and economic contributions that exist because of immigration and diverse population, and that diverse populations often lead to the absence of discrimination, like we learned about in the United States history.
In conclusion, the debate surrounding immigration policies that we embarked on throughout United States history has been multi-faced and complex. By studying different historical periods, we can learn from past successes and failures to shape more informed and balanced policies for the future. Ultimately, finding common ground and striking a balance between security and economic concerns and humanitarian values will be crucial in addressing this perennial issue.